How's it going, guys? This week I want to discuss the tragedy that happened down in Florida. The active shooter that occurred at Stoneman Douglas High. I'm sure everybody by now is aware of it. The shooter, Nicholas Cruz, was found not far from the school and confessed to being guilty of committing the acts. I don't like to comment on things, the day they're released or within a couple of days of them being released. I like to kind of see what facts come forth. I really want to make sure that the full story unfolds before I make any judgments on what's actually occurred, and what the police didn't do, or in this case, what the FBI did or didn't do. Unfortunately, 17 lives lost. That's obviously a very bad situation. There were 3 faculty members, 14 students. A lot of people are going to point toward the weapon he used. I heard mental illness being thrown around a lot. All the research I did didn't really reveal any type of mental illness. It really looked like he had, everything I saw was OCD and ADHD. Maybe some signs of depression, maybe. He did have an Instagram pretty heavy on the side of violence. Apparently he had a lot of animals that were dead that he was posing with, whether or not he killed them or not. But that Instagram account's been taken down. But that's kind of the making of, a lot of people would call that a sociopath. Somebody that is going to lean toward doing further acts of violence. It starts something small, and then there's a fascination with it, and it kind of grows into something much larger. Unfortunately, I think the real failure here is going to be more friends, family, individuals around. He had several therapists that nobody really drew proper attention to this. It was one of those that it doesn't seem like any real threat was seen coming from him, even though all the warning signs are there. I think that's what we really should be focusing on. Not the weapon, not gun control, not whatever quote-unquote mental illness he may or may not have had. I think we really need to focus on prevention, deterrence, and try to figure out ways we can see something like this coming, or at least pay attention to the signs. I have a couple of notes written down, several things I just want to discuss. A little bit of background on the shooter. All throughout his high school, middle school days, he and his younger brother had issues at school. There were about 30 different calls, probably 20 reports or so that the police took at the family in reference to his acting out, whether it was running away or violence toward his brother or parents. His dad died, I believe it was back in about 2014. And his mom died back in November. So obviously a very troubled teen, a lot to deal with. At 19, I can only imagine losing parents like that. It'd be pretty tough for anybody to deal with, but obviously somebody that's already troubled like he was, I feel like there should have been a lot more effort put into, maybe making sure he was stable on the therapist side. If you're a therapist, you would think you'd have a better insight into what he's thinking or feeling. But each time that there was a report made, it was always based on him being perfectly fine, perfectly capable. One report was even quoted as saying there was no violent measures being taken, or he wasn't a threat to himself or anyone else. Obviously, that's not the case, but I guess hindsight is going to be 20/20. That's an old saying, but it rings true in situations like this. A lot of people are going to look back and say they should have or could have done something to help circumvent this incident, but instead, nobody wants to act. Nobody wants to take that extra step to reach out to an individual like this. If he's the one that's sitting alone at the lunch table and he felt he didn't have any friends or didn't have anybody to connect to, nobody wanted to be that person to connect to him for whatever reason. it looks like he did have an adopted mother, quote unquote adopted mother. He's an adult at this point. He's 19, but he did have a family friend take them in, him and his brother. So he obviously was cared for. Those individuals knew he had the weapon. I guess didn't see him posing any risk with the weapon. They made him keep it locked up. By what I've seen, it looked like they were pretty responsible about everything they were doing. You know, he obtained the weapon legally. We can argue all day about gun control measures. We can argue all day about how to take certain weapons off of the open market like that. But the truth of the matter, you know, the war on drugs has taught us nothing else that is going to drive the price up, but still drive the quantity. You know, supply and demand is still going to be there for weapons, is the same it is for drugs. You know, you're not going to be able to get illegal narcotics cheaply at this point, but you can still very easily get them. And the amount of weapons we have in America, you know, we're not going to be able to confiscate all those weapons. So I really feel like focusing on gun control is really the wrong path here. We're not going to achieve anything by doing that. You know, if we had started that way, you know, 250 years ago, if we had started the country that way, then it might be different. But at this point, we have more weapons than we have people in this country, and there's no way we're going to get all those weapons back. You know, you can argue having lower capacity magazines. Again, that's something, you know, it doesn't really take very long to reload a weapon. So whether it's a handgun, a rifle, a semi-automatic rifle like he had, it doesn't matter what type of weapon. You're going to be able to reload it. You're going to be able to find a way to use it. So I think we really need to focus on deterrence. You know, let's deter this active shooter, or prevent this active shooting from happening in the first place. One way I really feel like we can do that is to really look at how the situation unfolded. And you're not going to stop this. It's just like crime. You're not going to stop this type of situation from happening. But you can minimize it as best as you can. You can do what you can to make that situation null and void and have that threat neutralized a lot quicker if you want to take certain measures. You know, my opinion is going to be having some sort of armed individual in the school. I know a lot of individuals down there are saying that a good guy with a gun is not the answer to a bad guy with a gun. But in an active shooter situation, an individual dies about every 6 seconds. So if you're going to wait on law enforcement to respond, you know, in this type of situation, law enforcement probably got on scene pretty quick. You're talking maybe 5-10 minutes tops before you have law enforcement showing up. But you're talking 6 people are dying every 6 seconds. Somebody's dying. You're talking 10 people a minute. So in that time, you have 50 to 100 individuals that could possibly die in an active shooter situation before law enforcement shows up. In this situation, he ended up, from what I saw, ran out of ammo, ditched the weapons, took off the body armor he had, and has fled the school as another student. So he kind of was more concealed leaving, was found walking down the street a little while later. But you look at Cobb County, every school in Cobb County has a school resource officer. That's really becoming very prevalent throughout this area that I've seen. More and more they're putting a police officer or several police officers in campuses in order to stop this type of situation. And the percentage is pretty high, somewhere in the 75 to 85% range, where active shooter situations are actually stopped as soon as resistance is met. You look at Denver, Colorado, Aurora, Colorado, the movie theater shooting. As soon as law enforcement showed up, the individual gave up. That's been shown time and time again that that's going to be the best way to actually stop the threat and neutralize that threat, is to have some form of resistance. So a lot of people aren't comfortable having weapons in it. You know, one argument you're seeing from people is to arm teachers and have every teacher have a weapon. To me, that isn't very practical. I think it would probably be effective, but how are you going to take, you know, the teachers of every school across America and train them to have a weapon and properly use that weapon when we can't even properly fund the education system as a whole right now. So I don't see that as really being a viable option either at this point. One thing that I really saw that I liked, there's pretty much a 3-step method that I found would be pretty effective once this type of situation starts occurring. And it's you run, hide, fight. If you can run and help others, facilitate others running, that's obviously step number one. Try to escape the situation as a whole. While you're doing so, you of course want to call 911. Try to get get law enforcement actively responding. The other option is hide. The second step is hide. When it comes to hiding, you really want to make it very discreet. Obviously, if you're banging things around, that's going to draw attention to you. But hiding is a good option. One thing that I saw somebody put up that they should have hit the smoke alarm. That'd be a good way to alert everybody that there's an emergency. What you don't want to do, that's like the very last thing you want to do if you think about it. If you pull that alarm and all of a sudden everybody floods into the hallway, which from what I believe I saw, this guy, he actually did that to push everybody. Alright, sorry about that, guys. We had a little bit of technical difficulty. The last part that I wanted to talk about is the fight step. One of the big things that I really think we need to push is fighting and combating the attacker. So essentially, if you have 3 or 4 brave, courageous individuals that are willing to push forward and be that front line of resistance that individual actually faces, the likelihood is very good that many lives are going to be saved. Now, of course, you can't expect this from everybody, this type of act from everybody, but plain and simply, it's going to be the best way to actually save lives. And if more people are going to act like that, I think the level of frequency is going to decline with active shooters, and I think that the amount of casualties is definitely going to sharply decline per incident. I'd be curious to know what everybody thinks, though. Those are my thoughts from my experience, what I think would actually help and would work. If you feel like gun control is actually going to be the answer, please let me know. Leave a comment. Let's have a good conversation about this. I'm definitely trying to stay out of the political side of it. I know there are plenty of politics involved in this, but I'd like to see more of what we can do, or what everybody thinks we can do to actually make a difference. We can debate certain things all night long, but it's not actually going to change. There's never going to be an amendment that neutralizes the Second Amendment. It's just, I can't ever see that happening. So let's have a good conversation. If you think having teachers armed and trained properly is a good way to go, I would like to hear about that. Or if there's some other idea I haven't thought of, or something that you think would be even more effective, definitely let me know. I hope everybody has a good week, and definitely keep everybody in Florida in your thoughts.